Clara froze as a shrill alarm tore through the house. "No," she whispered, already sprinting toward the nursery. The sound wasn't just loud. It was the unmistakable emergency alarm from her newborn son's heart monitor. She burst through the doorway and stopped cold. The monitor's power cable dangled uselessly from the wall. In its place, her sister-in-law's tablet sat charging on the nightstand. "What are you doing?" Clara shouted as she lunged toward the outlet. Her mother-in-law barely looked up from where she stood beside the crib. "Relax," she said with an annoyed sigh. "Emily has an important meeting. Her tablet was almost dead." Clara ripped the charging cable from the tablet and shoved the heart monitor's plug back into the outlet with trembling hands. "It can't be unplugged," she cried. Her father-in-law folded his arms. "Stop panicking. Newborns are strong. 5 minutes without that machine won't hurt him." The monitor flickered back to life before another alarm sounded, forcing Clara's heart into her throat. She scooped up her baby, checking every tiny breath while reaching for her phone with shaking fingers. The neonatal emergency number answered immediately. "Our baby's heart monitor was disconnected," Clara gasped. "It was unplugged." The nurse's tone changed instantly. "Reconnect it if you haven't already. Then bring your baby to the hospital immediately." Clara looked up. Her in-laws weren't frightened. They looked irritated, as if she were the one causing the problem. That was the moment she realized something was terribly wrong. Only 3 weeks had passed since Clara had brought her son home from the hospital. His delivery had been difficult, and although he was improving every day, the doctors had insisted on continuous heart monitoring until they were completely confident his irregular heartbeat had resolved. Before anyone had been allowed into the house, Clara had gathered the entire family around the nursery. "This monitor stays plugged in at all times," she had told them. "If anything happens to it, call me immediately. Never unplug it." Everyone had nodded. Even her mother-in-law. Especially her mother-in-law. Now those same people acted as though none of those conversations had ever happened. "Oh, honestly," her mother-in-law muttered while Clara packed the diaper bag. "You're making a family crisis out of nothing." Father-in-law shook his head. "You young mothers read too much online." "My doctor gave those instructions," Clara snapped. "No," he replied calmly. "You're just letting fear control you." Emily finally looked up from reclaiming her tablet. "I told Mom I only needed 10 minutes. My presentation could decide my promotion." Clara stared at her. "You risked my baby's life for a battery." Emily rolled her eyes. It wasn't that dramatic. The words hit Clara harder than the alarm ever had. She buckled her son into his car seat while the monitor continued its startup sequence. Not one person offered to help. Not one person apologized. As she backed out of the driveway, her phone vibrated. A notification from the hospital's remote monitoring service had just arrived. She expected a simple alert confirming the power interruption. Instead, the message read, "Critical event recorded. Additional system data available for physician review." Clara's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Additional system data. What exactly had the system captured besides the alarm? The emergency department felt unnaturally quiet compared to the chaos that had erupted in Clara's home. She sat beside the examination room, her newborn sleeping against her chest while nurses moved quickly around them. Every few minutes, someone checked the portable monitor attached to his tiny body. Clara couldn't stop staring at the screen. A pediatric cardiologist stepped inside. "We're running a full evaluation," he said. "Right now he's stable, but interruptions in prescribed monitoring are something we always investigate." Clara swallowed. "So, he could have been in danger." "The reason we use continuous monitoring," the doctor replied carefully, "is because we don't always know when an abnormal rhythm begins. Even a brief loss of monitoring can mean we miss an important event." Those words settled heavily in the room. For the first time since leaving home, Clara realized she hadn't overreacted. If anything, she had reacted just in time. As she waited, her thoughts drifted back to the day they brought their son home. The discharge nurse had demonstrated every piece of equipment. This monitor stays connected 24 hours a day, she'd explained. She had looked directly at everyone standing in the room. If someone accidentally disconnects it, reconnect it immediately and call the monitoring service. Clara remembered repeating those instructions again once they arrived home. She'd even taped a handwritten note above the outlet. Do not unplug medical equipment. Her mother-in-law had laughed. You act like we're children. Clara had smiled politely. I just want everyone to know how important it is. Looking back now, she wished she hadn't tried so hard to keep the peace. Her husband, Daniel, hurried into the hospital nearly an hour later. He looked exhausted. I came as soon as I could. He kissed Clara's forehead before looking at the baby. How is he? They're still checking him. Daniel nodded, then lowered his voice. My parents said there was a misunderstanding. Clara stared at him. A misunderstanding. They said Emily's tablet was dying, and they only unplugged the monitor for a minute. For a minute? Clara? No, Daniel. She pointed toward the examination room. That machine isn't decorative. He rubbed his forehead. I know. Do you? His silence answered for him. Later that afternoon, one of the neonatal nurses returned with the preliminary report. Your baby's vital signs look reassuring, she said. Relief flooded Clara's face. But, the nurse paused. I need you to understand something. Continuous monitoring is prescribed because changes don't always happen while someone is watching. That's why disconnecting the equipment, even briefly, creates unnecessary risk. So I wasn't overreacting. No. The nurse shook her head firmly. You followed exactly the right procedure. Those words felt like someone finally believed her. Daniel quietly stepped into the hallway and called his parents. Clara could hear only his side of the conversation. Mom, why would you unplug it? No, that's not what the doctor said. You knew what the instructions were. His voice became tighter. I asked you a simple question. Several seconds passed. Then he slowly lowered the phone. They don't think they did anything wrong. Before Clara could answer, Daniel's phone rang again. He placed it on speaker. His mother's voice filled the hallway. If you two keep accusing us, she said coldly, don't expect us to help your family anymore. The line went dead. Daniel had barely ended the call when a hospital administrator approached them with a clipboard. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Both of them stood. I'm Karen from Patient Safety. Because this involved prescribed monitoring equipment, we need to document exactly what happened. Clara exchanged a glance with Daniel. This wasn't just another family argument anymore. It had become an official hospital matter. Karen led them into a small consultation room. We'll need statements from everyone who was present. Clara carefully described finding the unplugged monitor, the tablet charging in its place, and the comments her in-laws had made. Karen wrote everything down without interrupting. Then she looked at Daniel. Does your account differ? Daniel hesitated. I wasn't there when it happened. He took a slow breath. But my wife has been very clear about the monitor since we brought our son home. Karen nodded. We'll be contacting the other family members as well. Less than an hour later, Daniel's phone began buzzing nonstop. His mother had created a family group chat. One message appeared after another. Mother-in-law asterisk. The hospital is taking this far too seriously. Father-in-law asterisk. Clara has always been dramatic. Then Emily joined. My tablet was almost dead before an important presentation. Nobody expected all this. Within minutes, aunts, uncles, and cousins began replying. Surely it wasn't intentional. New mothers are under a lot of stress. Let's not destroy the family over a misunderstanding. Clara read each message in stunned silence. Not one person asked how the baby was. Instead, they were discussing whether she had overreacted. Daniel finally typed a response. The doctors said disconnecting the monitor created unnecessary risk. His father answered almost immediately. Doctors always exaggerate to avoid lawsuits. Another message followed from his mother. You need to support your parents instead of encouraging Clara's paranoia. Daniel stared at the screen. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to answer them. A neonatal nurse entered the waiting area carrying a tablet. I wanted to let you know something that may become important. Clara looked up. The monitoring company logs every interruption automatically. What do you mean? The system records the exact second power is lost, and the exact second monitoring resumes. Clara blinked. So, there's already a timeline. The nurse nodded. Every event is time-stamped. Karen, the patient safety administrator, looked thoughtful. If there are conflicting statements, those records will help establish exactly what occurred. The room fell quiet. The in-laws' version of events suddenly seemed much less certain. Karen flipped another page on her clipboard. One more question. Clara looked at her. Does your home have any security cameras? She frowned. Why? If we're determining whether prescribed medical equipment was intentionally disconnected, any available footage could be relevant. Daniel's eyes suddenly widened. The nursery. Clara looked at him. What? When we upgraded the security system last month. He pulled out his phone. The hallway camera points directly toward the nursery entrance. Clara's pulse quickened. She had almost forgotten about it. Before Daniel could open the app, his phone rang again. His mother's name flashed across the screen. He declined the call. Seconds later, Emily called. Then his father. 3 calls in less than a minute. Daniel frowned. That's strain. Clara slowly opened the security app. The loading circle spun across the screen. Then a list of saved recordings appeared. The footage from that morning was still there. Daniel didn't press play immediately. He simply stared at the thumbnail from the hallway camera, while Clara's heartbeat seemed louder than the hospital monitors surrounding them. If we're wrong, he murmured. Clara looked at him. We're not. He tapped the recording. The footage opened with an empty hallway. The timestamp matched the exact minute Clara had stepped into the kitchen to prepare a bottle. A few seconds later, Daniel's parents walked toward the nursery. His mother pushed the door open. His father followed. Emily remained in the hallway, holding her tablet. There isn't another outlet, Emily asked. His mother shook her head. Not close enough. Clara's stomach tightened. The 3 of them disappeared inside the nursery. The hallway camera couldn't see into the room, but the microphone picked up every word. Emily sighed impatiently. My meeting starts in 2 minutes. Mother-in-law answered without hesitation. Then unplug that machine. Father-in-law chuckled. It'll survive. Clara covered her mouth. There was a brief pause. Then the unmistakable sound of a plug being pulled from the wall echoed through the recording. Exactly 1 second later, the emergency alarm erupted. Emily laughed nervously. That's loud. Mother-in-law sounded irritated. Ignore it. But Clara said, oh, she'll panic over anything. Father-in-law interrupted. She's becoming obsessed with that monitor. Another voice followed. The baby's sleeping. So what's the problem? Daniel stopped the video. His face had gone completely pale. They knew. His voice barely came out. They knew exactly what they were doing. Clara reached for his hand. He didn't move. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Every excuse, every claim of misunderstanding, every accusation that Clara had overreacted, collapsed under less than a minute of recorded audio. Karen, the patient safety administrator, listened carefully as Daniel replayed the recording. She didn't interrupt once. When it ended, she placed her pen on the table. "May I have permission to make a copy of this recording for the incident file?" Daniel nodded immediately. "Yes." Karen looked at Clara. "This recording, together with the monitor's event log, establishes a consistent timeline." She opened another document. The monitoring service recorded loss of power at 10:14:37. She glanced back at the video. The unplugging sound occurs at precisely the same second. She looked up. That consistency is important. Clara felt the weight of the morning shift. This was no longer about convincing anyone. The evidence spoke for itself. Daniel's phone rang again. His mother's name flashed across the screen. He answered. "What?" Her voice was no longer confident. "Daniel, don't send that video to anyone." He remained silent. "It doesn't show everything. It shows enough. We were trying to help Emily. You unplugged our son's medical equipment. It was only for a few minutes." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You heard the alarm." Nobody answered. "You heard it and left it disconnected." His mother finally spoke again. "Families don't ruin each other over mistakes." Daniel's voice became steadier than Clara had ever heard it. "This stopped being a family mistake the moment you ignored my son's medical needs." He ended the call. Less than 5 minutes later, Emily called Clara directly. She answered without speaking. "Please," Emily said, crying now, "delete the recording." "No. My career could be over if everyone sees it." Clara looked through the hospital window toward the nursery, where nurses continued caring for her son. "You were worried about your meeting." Silence. "I was worried about my baby." Emily began sobbing. "It wasn't supposed to become this." "It already did." Clara quietly ended the call. She had barely set her phone down when there was a knock at the consultation room door. Karen stood and opened it. A woman carrying an official hospital folder stepped inside. She introduced herself calmly. "I'm the hospital's patient advocate." She placed the paperwork on the table. "I'll need to discuss the next steps regarding this documented safety incident." The patient advocate introduced herself as Rebecca and took a seat across from Clara and Daniel. "I know this has been an overwhelming day," she began, placing several documents neatly on the table. "My job is to make sure your child's safety is protected and that the facts are properly documented." She slid one report forward. "This includes the physician's assessment, the monitoring services event log, and, if you consent, the security recording." Daniel answered without hesitation. "You have our permission." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you." She looked at Clara. "Based on what we've reviewed so far, the interruption wasn't caused by equipment failure or an accident. The evidence shows the monitor was intentionally disconnected." For the first time that day, no one questioned Clara's account. No one suggested she had imagined it. No one called her emotional. The truth had replaced every excuse. A short time later, the pediatric cardiologist returned with a reassuring smile. "I have good news." Clara immediately stood. "Our son's evaluation looks very encouraging." She let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for hours. The interruption didn't cause lasting harm because the monitor was restored quickly and you brought him here immediately. Tears welled in her eyes. "So he's okay?" "Yes." The doctor smiled warmly. "And you did exactly what a parent should do." Clara lowered her head for a moment as relief finally caught up with her. Everything she'd been accused of, everything she doubted, had been the right decision. Daniel sat beside her after the doctor left. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm sorry." Clara looked at him. "I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding." "I know. I kept thinking there had to be another explanation." He shook his head. "But there wasn't." His voice cracked. "I should have believed you the moment you called." Clara reached for his hand. "This wasn't easy for you." "No." He looked toward the nursery. "But choosing our son shouldn't have been hard." That simple sentence changed something between them. For the first time since becoming parents, Clara knew they were finally standing on the same side. Over the next several days, the hospital completed its documentation. The monitoring company's timestamps matched the security recording down to the second. Every statement was compared against the evidence. Every claim was reviewed. The conclusion never changed. The monitor had been unplugged intentionally, despite clear medical instructions. News spread through the extended family much faster than Clara expected. At first, several relatives who had criticized her asked Daniel what had really happened. Instead of arguing, he simply told them the hospital had verified everything. When a few close family members watched the recording, the tone of every conversation changed. His aunt called Clara. "I owe you an apology." Clara remained quiet. "I believed what your in-laws told us." Another relative admitted the same thing. "So did I." One by one, the people who had accused Clara of overreacting realized they had judged her without knowing the facts. The apologies couldn't erase what had happened. But they made one thing unmistakably clear. The family narrative had completely reversed. Daniel's parents continued trying to defend themselves. "It was only a few minutes. We never meant any harm." It was blown out of proportion. But those words carried no weight anymore. Not after the recording. Not after the hospital's findings. Not after doctors confirmed the seriousness of disconnecting prescribed monitoring equipment. Even Emily eventually stopped making excuses. She called Daniel one final time. "I never thought it would become this." "It became this," Daniel replied calmly, "when you decided your meeting mattered more than my son's safety." She had no answer. Together, Clara and Daniel made a decision they should have made long before. Visits would only happen under their conditions. No one would ever be alone with their son without their permission. Medical instructions would never be debated. If anyone questioned those rules, the visit would end immediately. They put those boundaries in writing and sent them to every immediate family member. There were no negotiations. No exceptions. Daniel's parents protested. "You can't keep our grandson from us." Daniel answered with quiet certainty. "We're not keeping him from safe people." The conversation ended there. Months passed. Their son continued improving with every checkup. Eventually, the cardiologist smiled during one appointment and disconnected the monitor for the last time. "You won't be needing this anymore." Clara looked down at the little device that had once filled every hour of her day with anxiety. Now it represented something entirely different. The moment she learned that protecting her child mattered more than protecting anyone else's feelings. Life slowly settled into something peaceful. Their home felt calmer. Their marriage felt stronger. Daniel no longer tried to keep everyone happy. He focused on keeping his family safe. And Clara no longer apologized for trusting her instincts. She had earned that confidence, not because she had won an argument, but because she had refused to ignore the voice telling her that something was wrong. Looking back, she realized the hardest part wasn't hearing the alarm. It was realizing the people she had trusted most had ignored it. Losing the illusion of family harmony was painful. But gaining the certainty that her child would never again be placed at unnecessary risk was worth every difficult decision that followed. From that day forward, Clara never confused keeping the peace with keeping her child safe, and she never let anyone else make that mistake again.